so grateful to have you on the podcast today, Jen, and that it's something that pushes you outside your comfort zone, chatting with me and being recorded and talking about education and the role education has played in your life and is playing in your future, will play in your future. But I really think that the insights that you have right now, more than, you're really considering a lot about environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and thinking about the future of human beings on this planet. And I think now more than ever, it's a really important way of looking at education and the role education can play. So it's going to be really valuable insights. So thanks for pushing yourself out of your comfort zone.
Thanks, Michelle.
I always start by asking people about their own experiences in education. So you went to school, you were born and raised in Ontario, but were you born in? No, you weren't.
Born and raised in Alberta.
Calgary. In Alberta. Mm-hmm. And how long were you in Alberta before you moved to Ontario?
My whole childhood. So I moved to BC when I was 19 and then spent a year there and then moved to Toronto around 2021.
Okay, so in Alberta, going to school, elementary, secondary school, were you a kid that always loved going to school, or did you live for summer vacations? Were you interested in the way school worked, or what are your early memories of feeling connected or not connected to the schooling process?
I have really fond memories of grade 1. And very what we might call an old school teacher now. I loved going to school. I was hungry to learn and excited by her. She was super engaged and dynamic, and she had really sort of clever ways of supporting children at different developmental levels. I remember so much about school and from grade 1. I was 6 years old. And then I basically checked out after that. Grade 2 felt like super boring because I learned a lot of it just felt kind of like a repetition. I remember feeling kind of unimportant. And my grade 1 teacher had put a lot of emphasis on getting to know the children and knowing who each child was and what they might need in a day to support them and feel seen. And then I never really felt that again until junior high school. So in Alberta, you go to primary school until grade 6, and then you go to junior high school from 7, 8, 9, and then you go to high school for 10, 11, 12. So I remember in junior high school, I had a math teacher that was very similar. He was incredibly supportive and looking for ways to connect directly with each of the students and find, he loved the challenge of finding a way in for each student. And that was in grade 7. And he was, I remember my marks were really high and I felt really confident. And then he went off to school for the gifted in Calgary. So we lost him at that school. And then really, again, most of the rest of my schooling, I was pretty checked out. It was pretty like something I have to do. Don't really want to do it. I don't really remember a lot of it. And it's interesting now when I talk to people, like if I talk to my husband about his school experience. So I went to school in the 80s and 90s. He went to school in the 70s and 80s. And he went to school in Ontario. I went to school in Alberta. So some big differences, but he remembers the literature that they read. He remembers the math. He remembers teachers. I don't have any of those memories. I remember one Shakespeare experience in high school. And I was a band kid. So I remember doing band. And then in grade 12, I was accepted into an apprenticeship program at Alberta Ballet. So I had a really great guidance teacher that arranged my day so that I only went to school in the mornings and did my academics in the morning, and then I went and danced in the afternoon. So I remember grade 12 fairly well, and just in that here I was doing what I wanted to be doing, and I had somebody that again saw me and supported what I wanted to do.
It's so fascinating, that notion of being checked in versus checked out, and the role that a human being plays in incentivizing that motivation. So the teacher in grade 1, the teacher in grade 7, the guidance support in grade 12, these are human beings that enabled you to feel more checked in neurologically. All of a sudden, I'm like paying attention. I'm interested. This is something I remember. So now, how, what it looks like being checked in and paying attention looks like now, being the age that we are, being able to reflect and be like, I remember that experience,
Mm-hmm.
because that person. So there's two sides of the coin, because there's that, you're talking about a person drawing you in, being engaging. You use the word dynamic. We can unpack that a little bit, because I think that matters in terms of what are those traits really that do that make you feel that someone is like interesting to pay attention to. But then the flip side, seeing you. So they themselves are interesting human beings. They're presenting information in interesting ways or engaging ways. They're talking to you like you're a human being. So they're communicating effectively with you. So they have some personality traits as like quote unquote good teachers, or people who are working well in the system. But then that notion of like personalized education, that I'm a person in this system, you see me and my needs are slightly or greatly unique. Yeah. And it's not the average experience. Why do you think in the school that you went in, when you think of the other grades, not grade 1, not grade 7, not grade 12, what were the conditions of the system that you feel anonymized you, made you not seen? What were the systemic issues? Because they exist still now, Jen. Like there are still things in the school system, the broad ranges of public schooling around the world, that doesn't see kids in the majority of years that they're learning in these formal school systems. So what are those conditions that you remember being contributing to that feeling of anonymity?
The classes got bigger. I mean, there's no, like, they just got bigger. And so suddenly you're in a room with, maybe 15 in grade 1, and then gradually up to 30 by the time I'm in high school classes, or even elementary school classes. So the school I went to in primary school was, we called it elementary school, was a multi-aging system is what they did. So they were combining grade 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. But I didn't get looped into that until grade 3. So my grade 1 and 2 were still separate. And then, but that also made the classes bigger. And then in grade 5 and 6, the class was huge because, so it was a 5-6 split, but then we were in this giant classroom with felt like a paper divider between another giant classroom. So this, and we were at the back of the library. So the amount of sound was just, all I can remember is just not being able to like hear anything except all the sound around me. and there was no natural light as well in that space.
Yeah, the conditions, the infrastructure that you're learning in. I mean, I remember so clearly, not what I learned in grade 7 and 8, but the fact that we were in cubicles outside because of the overflow of sizes of classes. And it's, it really is unfortunate, because you have these instructors, you have these people who want to teach. And I know we'll dive into it. It's later on, but this, that you've also felt drawn to this idea of teaching, and you've been doing it in your arts background in terms of choreography and working, collaborating with artists and being an educator in the arts-based space. But in the academic spaces or in these formal schooling systems where we expect teachers to see all of the students, right? Like we know what makes good teachers, right? Be dynamic, help, try to see them, address their unique needs. Like you can know this as an instructor. This is not rocket science. But then they give you 30 students, no resource staff. You're at the back of the library. No natural light. And what are you supposed to do as someone put in those very difficult positions? So I think that these stories that you're mentioning here resonate a lot in terms of how people listening have also gone through the system. They definitely resonate with me as well, growing up and going to school in BC. And I went to a private school, but still, it was a lot of the same conditions applied. So this kind of way of going to school in the 80s and 90s, we date ourselves. And now I want to pick up the thread of the arts. So you, as mentioned in the intro, you have a very lengthy career in the arts, specifically contemporary dance. And where did you find school supported that at a young age? Was it only at grade 12? Did you only feel that you got access to what, these qualities in you that you really wanted to explore and were kind of passions for you? Or did you feel that there was room for the arts and that was supported? Because I think this is another trend that a lot of people will resonate with, the role of the arts in your education. When did it, how was it supported from elementary through to secondary?
Yeah, I actually have memories of like a music room in elementary school. That was great and exciting to go to, but then it was eliminated around the time I was in grade 5, which is a long time ago for it to already have been eliminated. But it was great. We went twice a week, and sat in a circle and sang songs and did those things. So that was fabulous. And then arts wise, I mean, I think unfortunately, because not unfortunately, but I had such a rich artistic experience in my home life between my mother being a dance teacher, choreographer, and then my father at the time working in an arts and crafts studio at the Montreal College. So he was in pottery and woodworking. So I had a lot of access to skilled arts. And so I remember noticing that a lot of the things that we would do would be sort of prescribed crafts. Like, here's a drawing, you have to color it in the lines. Here's some macaroni, you have to make a circle with them. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for what I think, really believe the arts is about, which is expanding the imagination and the experience through discovering what your desires are with the macaroni or the blank piece of paper with the crayons. So there wasn't a lot of that at school, but at home I had a lot of access to that. I had an art teacher in elementary school and then again in high school. And they were both, now that I think about it, they were both super hands-off, which was hard at the time because I had then been sort of conditioned to having the you must do this model. And now I have this teacher that's saying, you can paint anything. And so there's a balance, right, between needing a structure and too much structure. And so I had sort of both experiences at school. One teacher who now when I look at it, I think she was pretty checked out. Like, so she wasn't able to give us a structure. She would just give us paper and pens. But because it wasn't part of our learning growing up to just have paper and pens, we haven't developed that relationship with a blank piece of paper and drawing materials. And then in high school, similarly, we had a teacher that would do like a lecture at the beginning of the semester and then the middle and then near the end, and he would just require us to submit a portfolio. And I remember feeling like super overwhelmed by, what do you mean submit a portfolio? But him, on the other hand, he was very open. Like, he would just sit in his office. The art room would be open and we could do anything. And he would just be sitting in his office. And so as long as you were comfortable approaching him, he was fantastic. And he would give you ideas or he would suggest things, but you had to be able to take that step and which also was not necessarily always feasible for everyone. And even for myself, I remember at times I felt really great going to talk to him. And then at other times I felt like I needed more direction. So,
and isn't it funny that what you're talking about too is typically when, and again, these are trends and patterns that I think are that resonate with many people, is when you're younger, when you need to be more free because you're already imaginative and you don't need the structure as much, you are overly structured, right? So it's like, you have to learn to color in the lines. I'm going to give you a very specific task with the macaroni. And maybe the exception being sometimes in music where, you're making a bunch of noise and there's a pattern or a beat or whatever. But then in those circumstances, elementary school arts programs get cut and they can be overly structured.
Yeah.
Then you get into older age groups and you all of a sudden people feel more, I mean, I know this is an assumption in the education space, but there's a level of, maybe some people are checked out, maybe there's a level of comfort in having students having more chaos in your class because your students are older. So you can be like, hey, draw whatever you want. Like, we're working on whatever. I'm going to give you a blank piece of paper now. You're in grade 7. And you're like, yeah, but for the last 6 years, you've been telling me what to do with the macaroni. So like, how am I now that my creativity is now less because I'm growing up in this structured world? Now you want to give me the creative freedom. So it seems flipped in that way, that what we should be focusing on is nurturing. And this is said by many different people. Sir Ken Robinson is a famous, British educationalist, and there's many others who talk about the point is not to try to teach human beings to be creative, but to try to avoid teaching it out of them.
Yes.
And if we could do that at a younger age and support that development and trajectory in the later years of these formal school systems, what might that do to our ability to solve problems, complex problems, right? Yes, okay, we might get great dance performances and musical compositions, but we also might get people who are like super creative at building a machine that can clean the oceans, or, like they're this creative, imaginative property of the arts. Is this really on your mind? So now, as a lengthy career in the arts, understanding the role imagination plays and reflecting on the role education plays in either supporting imaginative play or not. I know you've also been considering this a lot in recent years because of your child. You're now a mother, and have you been conscious of supporting that imaginative play in her and understanding that, like, okay, this is the thing. This is a balance between structure and chaos here. And I don't want my house to be a crazy mess. I want her to learn to read and write, but at the same time, I want to encourage her being able to have a blank piece of paper and a pile of macaroni and do what she wants to do. How have you mitigated that as a parent in these early years of motherhood?
Well, I've learned to accept a crazy mess. and then to clean up together. And that was a big turn for me, because I didn't grow up in a home where we could make a crazy mess. That's big. That we make a crazy mess all day, we play, we get all the things out, we move from one thing to the next, she moves from one thing to the next. And when we bake together and there's flour everywhere, and I'm not always good at it, but and then we clean up together. And so by the end of the day, it's not a crazy mess anymore. So that's been really big for me, to allow the creative process to be messy. And I've learned a lot about my own creative process. It's super messy, maybe not like visually, but it's messy. So allowing her process to be messy. And then
just before you move on from that one, how did that go? Was that because I often find that the problem is that people try to layer on behaviors after you already have a habit. So if you have let your kid make a mess and go to sleep and they didn't partake in the cleaning up,
right, and
then all of a sudden they're 3 or 4 and now you're asking them to clean up, they're like, yeah, but I don't want to do this. Like, I didn't have to do this before. Did you just do that from the beginning, or how did those conversations go with your daughter in terms of, this is a responsibility? Are there tantrums? Are there times that she doesn't do it? What is the language you use in terms of, we did this and then we did, is it choice consequence language, which seems a little more punitive, or is this, this is the way that, when we do this, then we have responsibility?
Mm-hmm. There's a combination of noticing where she's at with her day. And if a total meltdown is going to come from trying to clean up the whole day, then we do a little bit and then we go to bed and mom does the rest. So there's some of that. There also, when she was very little, and still now less so, I should bring it back, singing, a lot of singing, like we'd sing a cleanup song. And I would just sing the song and do the cleanup. And even if she's not doing it with me,
Yeah.
eventually she starts to do it.
Yeah, modeling.
Or there's a lot of a ton of modeling, right? So it's cleanup time, then I need to clean up with her. And that's the biggest thing. And we don't always get it, nail it, right? It just doesn't always happen. But and definitely sometimes going to bed at the end of a long day is a better choice than we have to clean everything up.
And again, we get to this idea of structured chaos, right? Like this is the whole point, is that even the process, the imaginative process is messy. The idea of balancing structure and chaos is messy. Yeah. There's no one way, but there's an intention. There's an intentional intentionality to the process.
Mm-hmm. And there's also, I'm learning more recently because of the sort of tantrums that come up, that she needs to hear me say, this is what you need to do. And then I need to give her the time to do it. I don't need to keep asking her to do it until she does it on my timeline. As long as it gets done, it's fine. And this is a big learning curve for me too, of like, I want her to clean it up now. But if I tell her to clean it up and she needs to fuss for a minute at something else, generally speaking, if I don't keep saying Dorian clean up, Dorian clean up, Dorian clean up, she'll come back to it and she'll do what I've asked her to do.
Well, this is also levels of responsibility, because you're reminding me of the alternative education system. So for a number of years, as you're aware, I taught in the alternative education system here in Toronto, the public school alternative education system. One of the things that everybody would always ask me, like, what makes it alternative? Multiple things. But one of the things is that timepiece. So you would say to students, in a week, by the end of the week, by Friday, end of day, these are the 5 tasks that are on the agenda, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you're going to read and do a comprehension, choose a reading activity, complete it, right? You're going to work on wherever you are in your math book, you're going to work on it and show us the problem set. You're going to whatever, right? So there's a task list. And because I think something that's missing critically in our education system is informed decision-making, teaching young people to make informed decisions. So these are the tasks that you have to do. There were students who consistently left the thing that they hated the most on that list for Friday afternoon. And I would say to them after Friday, and then it's not a fight. It's a conversation. It's, how does it feel? Do you like, it's Friday afternoon. And there were other kids who were out in the playground because they finished all the 5 things, and it's Friday afternoon and they wanted to go outside. And we're like, yeah, go outside. And they're in there doing math. We're like, how does it feel? Like, what was the decision behind it? Like, what were you thinking? You're like, well, I was avoiding it. Avoidance is real. Procrastination, these are totally human traits. How could we look at doing this next week? Is there what's a change to your decision-making process that we can maybe instill for next week? Maybe I'll try to do it on Monday and just get it out of the way. The first thing, let's try to get it out of the way. I was like, okay, let's try that next week, right? So you're giving space to make the decision as to this is what has to get done, but you don't have to do it I'm not going to give you a specific time, date, place. Bells are not going to ring and stress you out around getting these tasks completed. But there is a general level of responsibility and ownership that you're already trying to instill in her ability to decide, I've asked you to do something. We have things we have to be responsible for in life. Mm-hmm. And so, but you don't need to be on my timeline.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing too is the consistency, right? Like if you, in your alternative school, if they know there's going to be a list, it's consistent. They know they're coming in on Monday, here's the list. Right? And that all has to get done. And you as the teacher are following through on that. It's the same thing with my daughter. If she comes home from school and she just throws her clothes everywhere, she's like pulling off but she's also shedding her day, right? I have to understand that she's also shedding her day, and she's like coming into her home and she just throws it everywhere. And she like goes and flops on the couch. And I say to her, okay, Dorian, you have to put your clothes away and your boots away, and everything has its place and it all has to go away. she needs to sit on the couch for 5 minutes. And then she will put her things away. Or sometimes she'll put them away right away, depending on how she's feeling, right? But I'm always consistent with, if she hasn't done it in, say, 20 minutes, I'll come back to her and say, so Dorian, you haven't put your things away from when we got home. Let's go put your, she's also 4 years old. So I'll also sometimes go over and say, I'm going to put your boots away. You take your jacket. Like sometimes she needs me to support her, right? But it's consistency. Because if I start to just do it for her,
yeah, absolutely,
then she's not going to do it.
That's just part one of this exciting conversation, my friends. Click on part two and continue with us on this important journey we like to call the education revolution.